The first thing I did after getting a second chance at life was divorce my wife. In my first life, when she asked for a divorce, I refused. I fought to keep us together, blind to the truth. That is, until her lover, worn down by the disease she had given him, jumped from a skyscraper. Consumed by resentment, she intentionally infected me with HIV. In a fit of rage and despair, I accidentally killed her. I spent the rest of my life rotting in a prison cell. Now, waking up in the past, there was no way in hell I was going to walk that path again. A divorce? Absolutely. Whoever backed out would be a fool. 01, what did you just say? You want a divorce? I snapped out of my daze, staring at Isabella Reed with feigned disbelief. My voice trembled, and I made sure to look lost and confused. That's right, she shot back, not even bothering to look at me. I'm in love with someone else. Let's not waste any more of each other's time. We should just go our separate ways. She was sitting across from me at our small kitchen table, her eyes cold and resolute, her face a mask of undisguised contempt. Looking at that impatient expression, I had to suppress a surge of pure joy. Playing the part, I said with a quiver in my voice, Izzy, isn't there any way we can fix this? I already knew the answer. Isabella shot me a disdainful look and scoffed. Fix this? Are you kidding me? Do you even deserve it? After all these years, you're still the same pathetic pushover. Don't think I'm being cruel, she continued, her voice dripping with condescension. The fact that I'm even talking to you this calmly is a favor. In my past life, her words would have felt like a knife in my gut. But now, my perspective had changed entirely. You don't want a divorce? Too bad. Idol. 02, just like last time, the moment something didn't go her way, Isabella resorted to insults and ridicule. I used to think she was just brutally honest, someone who couldn't hide her feelings. Now I see it for what it was. She had always looked down on me. I have no idea why my past self was so fixated on a cheating woman like her. Whatever. This time, I just needed to get the divorce over with. No second thoughts. Fine, let's get a divorce, I said, my face a picture of misery, but my voice held a note of relief I could barely contain. If that's what you really want, then I'll give it to you. A flicker of surprise crossed her face before it hardened again. Glad you're not going to make this difficult. We can file the papers in a month. With that, she turned and walked out of the apartment without a backward glance. Watching her leave, I finally let out a long, slow breath. A wave of nausea washed over me. Thank God I got a do-over. As soon as she was gone, I headed out. I needed to go to the hospital. I had just returned from a year-long work assignment overseas, so I hadn't slept with Isabella in over a year. Still, a chilling anxiety gnawed at me. I had to be sure I hadn't already been infected without knowing it. The thought sent a cold dread through my veins as I drove. 03, I remembered from my previous life that by this point, both Carter Vance and Isabella were already HIV positive. They just didn't know it yet. Carter, unable to keep in his pants, had been frequenting prostitutes and caught the virus. By the time he noticed the symptoms, it was too late. He was forced to rely on a cocktail of medications just to keep the virus from ravaging his body. His family, terrified, wanted nothing to do with him. Mentally and physically exhausted, he chose to end his life by jumping off a building. It was only after his suicide that Isabella learned the real reason from his family. She panicked and rushed to a clinic, where a doctor confirmed her worst fears with a heavy sigh. Driven mad by the diagnosis, she hid her condition and came back to me, pretending she wanted to reconcile. Only after I, too, was infected did she reveal the truth, her face twisted into a grotesque sneer. Till death do us part, right? She had hissed. How could I let you run off and leave me to die alone? We're going to die together. In that moment, I snapped. I struck her, and she fell. I didn't mean to kill her, but she was dead. Knowing my own life was over, I calmly accepted my fate, was sentenced by the courts, and died in prison, ravaged by the disease. 04 at the hospital, I went through the works. I got every test they offered, a full-body checkup. I wasn't taking any chances. I watched the phlebotomist draw my blood, my heart pounding with every step of the process, silently praying that nothing would come back positive. I grilled the doctor about HIV, asking every question I could think of: transmission routes, symptoms, preventative measures, treatment options. He answered patiently, But nothing could calm the terror churning inside me. The days I spent waiting for the results were pure agony. I couldn't sleep. I'd lie in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with horrifying scenarios. One moment, I'd be picturing a future destroyed by AIDS. The next, I'd be consumed with rage at the thought of Isabella having already doomed me. During the day, I was a ghost. I couldn't focus on anything, couldn't muster the energy to do even the simplest tasks. I was just going through the motions. A few days later, the clinic called. The report was ready. My hands trembled as I took the envelope from the receptionist. I couldn't bring myself to open it right away. I took a deep breath, then slowly tore it open. Everything was normal, all clear. Seeing those results, the weight I'd been carrying finally lifted. The tension that had coiled in my gut for days finally unwound. Now all that was left was to finalize the divorce and cut Isabella out of my life for good. This time, if she was going down, she wasn't taking me with her. I swore to myself I would get away from her and the disaster she brought with her as fast and as far as I could. 05 The divorce went smoothly. We didn't have many assets to fight over. When we went to the courthouse to sign the final papers, Isabella was visibly impatient, scribbling her signature and leaving as if every extra second in my presence was torture. As the one at fault, she had no grounds to contest the division of our assets. We both got what we wanted. The moment the clerk handed me my copy of the divorce decree, an incredible sense of relief washed over me. It felt like I had finally broken free from a heavy chain that had been around my neck for years. Around the same time, the condo I had listed on Zillow sold. As I watched the buyer sign the contract and transfer the funds, I felt a complex mix of emotions. The thought that a toxic presence like Isabella had ever lived in that space soured the memory of it. Every room held a ghost of an argument or a cold shoulder. Most of all, I was terrified that the insane version of Isabella from my past life would reappear and try to infect me. I knew how HIV was transmitted and that I could protect myself, but as the old saying goes, you can never be too careful. Better to stay as far away from her and her new life as possible. There's no reasoning with crazy. After a few days of peace, Isabella didn't show up. Instead, her family did. 06, I was zoning out on the couch one afternoon when my phone rang. I glanced at the caller ID and groaned. My former mother-in-law. I rejected the call. A moment later, an unknown number popped up. I figured it was probably her again, but as a salesman, I couldn't risk ignoring a potential client. I sighed and answered. My dear son-in-law, I heard you sold your condo. Her voice oozed a syrupy sweetness that set my teeth on edge. I stayed silent, already guessing where this was going. Isabella probably hadn't told her parents about the divorce yet. When I didn't respond, she continued. Well, it's perfect timing. Your brother-in-law, Caleb, is getting married, and he's just a little short on cash. You should give the money from the sale to Caleb, she said, her tone shifting from sweet to demanding. After all, we're all family. It doesn't matter who spends it, right? In the background, I could hear Caleb's excited voice pipe up. Yeah, man, just wire me the money. Your money is my sister's money, and her money is my money. I let out a cold laugh. It was almost impressive how quickly they had claimed my money as their own. Absolutely shameless. This whole family was a piece of work. I'd learned all about their greed and entitlement in my past life. 07, ma'am, Isabella and I are divorced. Did she not tell you? I said, my voice calm despite the anger simmering inside me. She sounded genuinely shocked. What? She never said a word. Then, her tone turned accusatory. Did you cheat on her? I'm telling you, if you hurt my daughter, I'll make you regret it. Now that I knew her angle, this was easy. I cleared my throat. You got it backward, ma'am. She's the one who cheated. And from what I hear, her new guy is loaded. If you need money for Caleb's wedding, you should really be asking him. He makes more than me, and he's better looking too. Is that true? She asked, her voice a mix of suspicion and greed. Just as I expected, with one sentence, her attention was completely diverted. I simply said, yep. She hung up immediately. I could just picture it. My former mother-in-law already dialing her wealthy, new son-in-law. I almost felt a flicker of pity for Carter Vance. He had no idea what kind of parasitic leech he'd just welcomed into his life. After hanging up, I blocked her number and Caleb's. I didn't want to hear from any of them ever again. I finally felt like I could breathe, free from that toxic family for good. 08 after that, life was peaceful. One day, I met up with an old college buddy, Mark Johnson, at a coffee shop. The 10-year reunion is in a couple of weeks. Are you going? Mark asked. The thought of seeing Isabella there made my stomach clench. I've got something that day. I can't make it, I lied. Mark looked at me, his expression knowing. You're worried you'll see Isabella, aren't you? I nodded. Yeah. The last thing I wanted was to be in the same room with her, let alone sit at the same table. Just thinking about her made me lose my appetite. If you're not going, I'm not going either. Those things are pointless anyway, Mark said with a dismissive wave of his hand. They call it a reunion, but it's just a flex fest. He was right. The first couple of years after graduation, our get-togethers were genuine. We'd catch up, reminisce, and just enjoy each other's company. But over the years, they had morphed into shallow competitions over who had the better job, the bigger house, or the more expensive car. The friendship had been corroded by money and vanity. 09, after a moment of hesitation, I decided to give him a warning. Hey, Mark, if Isabella ever asks you to hang out, I'd say no. My tone was serious. Why? He took a sip of his latte, his eyes wide with curiosity. Just trust me on this, I said, my face grim. I debated telling him more, but decided against it. It was better for him not to know the details. It would only put him at risk. Mark knew me well enough not to push. He let out a long sigh. Allicht, man. I'll take your word for it. It's not like I'm a big fan of hers anyway. We barely ever talk. Then, his expression shifted to one of righteous indignation. I told you from the beginning that something was off about her, but you insisted she was just misunderstood. And look what happened. The second she found a rich guy, she dumped you. His words stung, but he wasn't wrong. I had been so blind back then, treating her like she was some kind of treasure. I forced a bitter smile. All right, let's drop it. I don't want to talk about that toxic mess. I just wanted to put that chapter of my life behind me. Later, I heard from other friends that Isabella had made a huge splash at the reunion. She had paid for everyone's drinks all night, a grand gesture that earned her a chorus of praise and congratulations on landing such a successful new husband. Naturally, those compliments came with a few backhanded jabs at me, which I'm sure fed her ego perfectly. I was just glad I hadn't gone. Then it turns out you can't always avoid your demons. Sometimes, fate just loves to throw them right back in your face. A few days later, I was doing my weekly grocery run at H-E-B, trying to decide what to make for dinner. I looked up from a display of avocados and saw them. Isabella and Carter Vance. My heart sank. A terrible feeling washed over me. Carter, holding Isabella's hand, strutted toward me with a smug, contemptuous look on his face. He eyed me up and down, a mocking smile playing on his lips. Well, if it isn't your pathetic ex-husband. All alone, are we? His tone was laced with condescension, as if I were something he'd scraped off his shoe. He tapped his forehead theatrically. Oh, that's right, I forgot. You're a lonely bachelor now. My bad. He sighed, but his eyes were devoid of any real sympathy. Seriously, Izzy, what did you ever see in this guy? Carter asked, turning to her. Isabella wrinkled her nose in disgust, looking at me like I was a piece of garbage. She snuggled into Carter's arms and whined. Ugh, honey, don't even talk about it. Just seeing him ruins my mood. Let's just ignore him. 11 Carter's expression was smug, the mockery intensifying. He looked back at me, his eyes full of challenge. You know, Izzy, we should invite the ex to our wedding. If it wasn't for him letting you go so graciously, I never would have gotten you so easily. We have to show our gratitude. Besides, he added, his voice dripping with sarcasm, we can show him what a real wedding looks like. You're so right, honey. Whatever you say, Isabella cooed, stifling a giggle behind her hand. The sound was like nails on a chalkboard. A clueless loser like him has probably never been to a big, fancy wedding in his life. I looked at them both, a half smile on my face, feeling nothing but disgust and contempt. I had no desire to trade insults with these two walking biohazards. I was afraid their stupidity might be contagious. Even more, I was afraid of the very real virus I knew they were carrying. Isabella's actions in my past life had left me deeply paranoid. Seeing that I wasn't taking the bait, Carter seemed to get annoyed. I turned to walk away, but in my peripheral vision, I saw him reach for my shoulder. My blood ran cold. I instinctively jerked back, pulling my arm away as I spun around. "Don't touch me," I shouted, my voice echoing in the aisle. "You're disgusting. I don't want to catch whatever you have." My outburst drew the attention of other shoppers. Isabella and Carter's faces flushed with anger and embarrassment. They shot me a furious glare, but didn't dare cause a bigger scene in public. They could only watch as I disappeared into the crowd. I walked quickly out of the store, relieved to be away from them, but feeling my disgust for them curdle into something much darker. 12 on the eve of their wedding, a friend of Isabella's dropped an invitation off for me. I glanced at it once before tossing it in the trash, and then washing my hands with disinfectant soap. The day of the wedding, Isabella and Carter had invited a huge crowd of friends, family, and colleagues. The ceremony was in full swing when a man, wild-eyed and holding a knife, burst into the venue. He was followed by a gaunt, sickly-looking woman. The man pointed the knife at Carter and screamed, "Carter Vance, you slept with my wife, and now you're going to pay our medical bills. If you don't, I'll kill you right here." The guests gasped, stunned by the sudden chaos. "What the hell are you talking about?" Carter yelled back. "I don't even know your wife." "My wife is Laura Peterson," the man shrieked. "She told me everything. She got AIDS after sleeping with you. If you don't give us money for treatment, we'll die here today." The woman beside him nodded weakly. "It's true. That bastard. He knew he had it and gave it to me." The word AIDS exploded in the room like a bomb. Guests scrambled backward, their faces masks of terror. A panicked murmur swept through the crowd, which was filled with Carter's colleagues, employees, family, and business partners. You could see the gears turning in their heads as they remembered every shared drink, every business trip, every meal. Suddenly, a young woman in the crowd shrieked, her body trembling uncontrollably. "Carter, is it true? Do you have that disease?" "No, he's lying," Carter insisted, his face pale. 13, he turned and bellowed for security. "Security? Are you all useless? Get these two lunatics out of here." But the damage was done. Most of the guests could already sense the truth. They began to subtly distance themselves from the screaming woman. She started rambling, her voice hysterical. "It's not what you think. We only slept together a few times. There's no way I could have caught it." "Holy crap," one of her coworkers muttered under his breath. "No wonder she got promoted so fast. She literally screwed her way to the top. So she was sleeping with the boss." "I never would have guessed," another whispered, staring at her with a mixture of pity and disgust. By now, Isabella's face was ashen. If what the man was saying was true, there was no doubt she was infected too. She slapped Carter hard across the face. "Is it true? Do you have it? And what the hell is she talking about?" Before he could answer, the man on the floor, now pinned down by security, let out a twisted, maniacal laugh. "Haha, Carter, have you been feeling run down lately? Noticed any rashes on your skin? I'll tell you what they are. It's AIDS." As he struggled, his shirt rode up, revealing clusters of angry, red lesions covering his arms and torso. Some of them had broken open, weeping a foul-smelling fluid. The security guards recoiled in horror, letting go of him as if he were on fire. Carter stared at the man's rashes, which looked identical to the ones on his own body. He collapsed to the floor, muttering to himself, "No, that's just an allergic reaction. It'll go away." At that moment, several people, including Isabella, bolted from the room as if fleeing a plague. The story was trending on Twitter before the night was over. In the following days, I got calls from family and friends who had heard the news, all asking worriedly about my health. I finally made a public Facebook post explaining the situation, and thankfully, the concerned calls and texts slowly stopped. 14. In the wake of the scandal, Carter Vance's company went into a nosedive. The office was in chaos. Employees, terrified and disgusted, resigned in droves, looking for the nearest exit. Shareholders began pulling their investments, desperate to cut their losses. Colleagues who had once respected Carter now cursed his name. They had seen him as a brilliant leader with a bright future, but now they saw him only as a monster. The office rumor mill went into overdrive. Protesters soon appeared outside the company headquarters, holding signs and demanding compensation for medical bills. Among them were people Carter had infected, as well as others who were simply terrified of potential exposure. The young woman from the wedding was there, too, her face a mixture of fury and despair. Sensing a viral story, TikTokers and YouTubers swarmed the building, setting up cameras for 24/7 live streams. They narrated the unfolding drama with breathless hyperbole, chasing clicks and views. 15. Carter Vance became a total pariah, afraid to even leave his house. He spent his days hiding, drowning in a sea of public condemnation and private fear. He was utterly alone. Soon after, his company filed for bankruptcy. The news was the final blow. Carter Vance took his own life, jumping from the balcony of his penthouse. In his suicide note, he wrote of his regret and shame, but it was far too late. His death didn't quell the public's anger. It only cemented his legacy of deceit and destruction. Carter's family kicked Isabella out onto the street. With nowhere else to go, she returned to her parents' house. But her mother and brother wanted nothing to do with her. They treated her like a leper, screaming at her to leave, even hitting her. A few days later, they packed up and moved without telling her where they were going, desperate to escape the stain of her scandal. Isabella was left standing alone in an empty house, consumed by hopelessness. The same old classmates who had praised her for landing a rich husband now acted as if they'd never met her. When she, now homeless, called to ask for money, they hung up or blocked her number. The cruel reality of her situation hit her with full force. Staring at her phone, at the wall of unanswered texts and calls, a profound sense of desolation washed over her. After that, I stopped paying attention to what happened to Isabella. Everything she was going through, she deserved. 16. One evening after work, I changed in my workout clothes, planning to go for a bike ride to clear my head. As I walked out my front door, I saw a figure bundled up in a hoodie and a mask, lingering suspiciously near my bicycle. They seemed to be fiddling with something. A knot of dread formed in my stomach. "Hey," I yelled. The person flinched, then took off running. I crouched down to inspect my bike. My blood ran cold. Taped to the seat, pointing straight up, was a hypodermic needle with a drop of blood on the tip. My heart hammered against my ribs. I was lucky I had come out when I did. If I just jumped on the seat like I usually did, the consequences would have been unthinkable. Without a second's hesitation, I called the police. They arrived quickly and carefully collected the needle for analysis. It was early evening, and plenty of my neighbors were out and about. The sight of police cars naturally drew a crowd of concerned onlookers who came over to see if I was okay. The officers asked me the standard questions. Had I gotten into any arguments lately? Did I have any enemies? I shook my head. I got along well with my neighbors. No one here would do something so vicious. But the image of that fleeing figure and a chilling sense of familiarity kept replaying in my mind. There was only one person I could think of who would be capable of such a hateful act. If I was right, it had to be Isabella. 17 in my past life, she had been the one to infect me, sentencing me to a world of pain. Now, in this life, she was trying to do it again. The woman was pure evil. I told the police about my suspicions, carefully omitting the part about being reborn. I wasn't that stupid. The officers immediately recognized the severity of the situation. If the needle was contaminated with HIV, this was no longer a simple prank. It was attempted murder. They knew that whoever did this was dangerous and unpredictable. Even though the attempt had failed, there was no telling what they might try next. They launched a full investigation. It didn't take them long. They found Isabella hiding in a storage unit nearby, wrapped in blankets. The police took her into custody. The lab results came back a day later, confirming that the needle was contaminated with HIV-positive blood. Isabella was charged with assault with a deadly weapon and malicious transmission of an infectious disease. The story created a new wave of fear and outrage in the community. People were horrified, calling her a monster who was trying to wage war on society. Many felt that even the harshest prison sentence wasn't enough. 18, because of my past life, I clearly remembered a specific set of winning lottery numbers. After winning $5 million from a Powerball ticket, the joy I felt was indescribable. This money wasn't just a windfall. It was the capital I needed to truly start over. I immediately quit my high-stress sales job. Then, I started to travel. I wanted to see the world, to experience everything I had missed out on. For 3 months, I lived freely and without a single worry. By the time I returned, I heard that Isabella had completely lost her mind in prison. She apparently spent her days screaming at the walls, claiming she had been reborn and that it was unfair that she was the only one who had to die this time. When I heard the news, I felt a distant sense of pity, but nothing more. After all, who in their right mind would ever believe a story about being reborn? Not long after, I learned she had been transferred to a psychiatric hospital. Unable to bear the torment of the advancing disease, she hanged herself one night. When I received that final piece of news, I felt a faint tremor in my soul. The life that had been cut short in my previous existence had been rewritten. Isabella had met her grim end. It all felt like a long, chaotic dream. Now the only thing left to do was live. I used my winnings to build a comfortable life, pursuing my passions and exploring my dreams. All the ghosts of the past had finally been laid to rest. I was no longer haunted by shadows. I was walking forward into the light. My life was just beginning, and I planned to cherish every second of this precious, unearned second chance.